Tree 1430 AM and 107.3 FM WRDN. I'm Brian Winnikins. This is the WRDN Morning Farm Report. And joining us this morning, Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. We got a whole bunch of things to talk about this morning. And thank you to our sponsors of our Newsmaker segment, including Compeer Financial, Animal Wellness Center of Buffalo Valley, Annabis Silo, Osteoplastics, Synergy Co-op, A&J Agronomy, and Wisconsin Farmers Union. And Senator Kind, Senator, I'm already trying to promote you again, Congressman Kind. So the FTC has come out and they filed a complaint against Frontier Communications. Folks in Mondovi and Buffalo County have really had a lot of issues. And City of Mondovi switched to something because they couldn't call the county seat with Frontier lines. This is all about internet speed. So what does this all mean, I guess, for folks in Mondovi and Buffalo County that are served by Frontier?
Well, good morning, Brian. Great to be with you as always. And I'm glad the FTC is getting serious about this. We've had a problem with Frontier up in Mondovi and Buffalo County for some time. I had a community meeting a little over a year ago, just before the pandemic hit, where I took a lot of complaints from people who had Frontier service and how bad they were administering it, how expensive it was, and just how shoddy the service was. But I'd also say this isn't limited just to the Frontier. This is other service providers doing the same thing. They come into a community with these grand promises. They don't deliver. They take the money. It's another reason why we need a comprehensive broadband plan for America that works, so that companies like Frontier can't take advantage of people. So we're going to monitor that FTC case very closely.
I guess if Frontier loses this, is there going to be refunds for folks from Mondovi and Buffalo County? Will those that want NTech be allowed? Well, where the federal government say, Frontier, you're out, NTech, you're in, here's the money that they would have used for broadband, make it happen, or what would happen?
Well, I think certainly with the case now, trying to refund customers' money is the ultimate goal, what the attorney generals have applied for. But we need better monitoring and oversight, especially for these bigger providers that just got awarded some big federal contracts for rural broadband expansion, to make sure that they live up to the promises and they don't slow walk it. That's been one problem, is they take the money, they say they're going to deliver right away, and it takes years for them to build out, which is unacceptable. But to make sure that they're adhering to the terms of the contract and not just taking the money and run. And that's another problem that we have to confront.
You mentioned, some of the, I think there's issues with CenturyLink. They've done this where they've taken money and they're, I think folks in parts of Plum City and Pepin and those areas, they're still kind of waiting. Meanwhile, you have places like NTech, 24/7 Telecom, Cochrane Fountain City Tel Co-op, and they've done it, or they're doing it. Why can't we just say, CenturyLink, Frontier, you're out? Guess what? NTech, 24/7 Cochrane Fountain City, you're in. Get it done.
Yeah, there are breach of contract terms in these contracts that you can activate if they aren't living up to the terms. But again, it's another reason why we need a comprehensive broadband national plan to build this out, especially the last mile in these rural areas, Brian. The private providers, they don't see the profit in it, and therefore they're not going to be quick to invest with very little return on it. The rate on investment just isn't there for them. So there's going to have to be a major public role in the private service. And that's what we're calling for in the infrastructure plan that we're working on right now in Congress, not unlike rural electrification of the 1930s. We knew then how hard it would be to close that last mile on electrification, but we got it done. And what a difference that made to rural America. The same thing needs to be done for broadband, high-speed connection today.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. Well, broadband is really part of infrastructure, but there's a couple of competing infrastructure bills, one from the president, one from the Republicans, and they're pretty far apart. And of course, we get all the political stuff going on, but doesn't it make sense, I guess, Congressman Kind, to say, you know what, let's bust this up. Let's hit 4 singles in a row and we'll still score a run instead of just trying to go for the fence. And maybe break it up into, the first one is planes, trains, and automobiles. The second one's going to be boats, water and sewer, and airports. And the third one's going to be pipelines and the electric grid. I mean, wouldn't that make more sense to bust this up over 10 years and just, again, kind of get it done?
Yeah, Brian, I'm in the categories. We need to get this done. We need to get it done right away. I'm so tired of having infrastructure weeks out in Washington and nothing ever comes from it. And you know how hard legislating is right now in order to get things across the finish line. There's always a reason for not doing things. And that is holding us back as a nation. Listen, if we want to beat China in the 21st century, we need to outcompete China. We need to out-invent, outproduce, outgrow China and be better than them. And that starts with a sound infrastructure system, not just the roads, highways, bridges, but our water system, our broadband system, our sewer system. We have PFAS problems, this forever chemical that causes cancer. That needs to be addressed. Otherwise, these communities are going to die. There's no way they're going to be able to survive with PFAS in their drinking water. And their homes will be unsellable. So that too is a major issue that we're trying to address in the infrastructure package. And listen, I'm doing my best with bipartisan negotiations, seeing if we can reach some common ground. But at the end of the day, we got to do something. Otherwise, we're just holding ourselves back.
Upper Mississippi River, the lock and dam system. I mean, that would be part of this. And this is actually kind of paid for by the barge operators. And I guess I still don't understand, why isn't this getting done?
Yeah, you got that Inland Waterway Trust where the commercial navigation contribute to. And in my discussions with them, Brian, they're willing to contribute even more, just as long as that money is dedicated to lock and dam repair and it can't be used for any other purpose. I'm in full agreement with that. But as we move forward on infrastructure, our inland waterway infrastructure has to be a part of this too, because man, if we had a dam failure here in the upper Mississippi, that's billions of dollars worth of damage that would happen overnight, because trade would just stop and it'd make it very hard for us to export our agriculture products or bring products up the Mississippi to us too. So this too is long overdue. Right now, a lot of these dams are being kept together with bubble gum and tape, quite literally. And that's just not good enough for a great power like us in the 21st century.
So is that something you would consider? Introduce a bill to say, okay, the money from the Inland Waterway Trust is only for dams, lock and dam repair, that sort of thing. And we're going to increase the rate because those folks have wanted to. Do you think you could get that through?
Yeah, it already is current law, Brian, that money raised for the Inland Waterway Trust has to be used for the inland waterway infrastructure and for no other reason. And we want to make sure that that guarantee remains in place and that can't be a slush fund where you can divert money for other purposes. So I'm going to do my best to maintain that language and protect it so that those in the commercial navigation who are willing to contribute more are assured that that money is going to go right back into the infrastructure that they need.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning, kind of on the lines of infrastructure recently. Canadian Pacific had first made a bid for Kansas City Southern Railroad, which would end up being for Wisconsin. Canadian Pacific goes through. Well, now we have rail access all the way to Mexico. And then Canadian National stepped in, and they're kind of the arch rivals. Kansas City Southern backed away from Canadian Pacific, and now the Canadian National deal is what's on the table here. Do you have concerns about a potential CN and Kansas City Southern merger?
You know, Brian, we all should, because right now we're seeing tremendous amount of consolidation in the economy, from large healthcare providers buying up smaller ones, railroads trying to develop their own captive lines where there's only one service that customers can go to. And that means they control the rates then. And so I think the Department of Justice has a job to do to make sure that we're not creating anti-competitive situations. Because in any capitalist economy like ours, when businesses have to compete, us customers win. And when they don't have to compete, we usually get stuck with a much higher bill. So we're going to have to be careful in monitoring these proposed mergers, make sure there's no monopolistic tendencies being developed, because that will only be more difficult for the customers then.
I know one of the benefits that at least both railroads have talked about, Canadian Pacific and Canadian National, is having one line that goes north to south, Canada through the US to Mexico, without having these log jams of having to switch from Canadian Pacific and then to Burlington Northern and then finally to Kansas City Southern, because they go the rest of the way to Mexico, where it just would always, it would be maybe more efficient for our farmers and agriculture. Is that though a positive benefit of at least the Canadian Pacific Kansas City Southern merger?
Well, it's true. There are economies of scale when you do get bigger. I mean, that's just basic economics. But you also then have to be willing to monitor the price and make sure there's no gouging taking place at the same time. And that's got to be a part of the equation. Now, this is the siren song of big monopolies. They say, well, we're very efficient. We deliver better service to the customers. And then they don't face any competition. And then they can set any price. We're seeing that now with the high tech, the big tech companies taking advantage of their monopolistic control of the marketplace. So I just think for too long, the Department of Justice Antitrust Division has been too dormant. And they have a role to play to make sure that we're maintaining healthy competition in our country so that the customers don't get gouged.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind this morning. Speaking of USMCA, yourself and some of your colleagues have reached out to the U.S. Trade Representative. You have some concerns on USMCA and enforcement, especially when it comes to dairy and Canada.
Yeah, we do. And it's exactly why we took a little bit more time to make sure we had strong enforcement language in this trade agreement. So if Canada or even Mexico don't live up to the terms, we have enforcement measures that we can take. And we're starting to do that now with Canada because they're not abiding by the tariff rate quota that they had agreed to when it comes to dairy imports into their country. And it's something that I, obviously being from Wisconsin, monitoring very closely. I just had a good meeting and conversation with our trade representative, Catherine Tai, on this issue. Just got off the phone about an hour ago with the Commerce Secretary, Romano, raising this issue with her too, since Commerce too does have a jurisdiction on trade issues. And it's very important that when you put in the time and the effort to try to strike a good trade agreement, you want all parties living up to those terms. And that's why you have to have strong enforcement provisions. Right now, we go into consultation with Canada and see if we can resolve this peacefully. But if they continue to drag their feet, we have sanctions remedies that we can hit them with if they're not abiding by the terms.
How long would it be before those would hit? If they start slow walking this, I guess we'll use that term. So then how long before we finally say enough's enough? Now we're going to enforce it. And how is it enforced?
Yeah, there are timelines that are built into the agreement, so the parties can't just slow walk and have a negotiation without end. So there are those built-in stops that will enable us then to invoke economic sanctions. All we're asking for, Brian, is just a level playing field to give our family farmers a fair chance to compete. Canada has access to our market. We're expecting a two-way street. That was a tough negotiation with Canada, but we got it done at the end of the day. And now we expect them to live up to it.
Talking with Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. Finally, this morning, Congressman Kind, there's a proposal out there to expand or make permanent the free lunches for school students, regardless of income, regardless of anything. It would just be universal school lunch, I guess. Where is this proposal at, and how are we going to pay for it?
Yeah, I'd like to see more of the details of that because I've always been a person who believes in means testing. Listen, if you can provide for yourself, that's great. But if you're a low-income family in a country like ours, children should not be going hungry. So I'm a big believer in means testing all these programs too, especially in light of the large budget deficits that we're facing today and the amount of national debt that's been accumulated. And I think that's just a fair proposition. So I'm going to have to take a closer look at what's being proposed.
That is Wisconsin 3rd District Congressman Ron Kind. You're listening to the WRDN Morning Farm Report.